Hello and welcome to Clay to Canopy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. In this episode, it is all about ceramics. I actually teach ceramics at a university here in California, and one of the projects is to make a ceramic train. Today, we're going to go through the stages of what it's going to be to make this passenger car, and I will do this train, the engine train, in another video, but first up is going to be the passenger car. If you do not have access to ceramics, you can actually look up some community colleges. Also, there are a lot of communities around that have ceramic centers that you can go to, and you just pay a fee to have your pieces brought and fired in a kiln. Ceramics is making a major resurgence in the art world, as well as communities are getting more involved in getting acquainted with this craft. And clay is pretty cheap. If you're looking to get into a new craft, this is definitely something that's tons of fun. Alright, so to make this passenger car, the first thing you're going to need is to have some prepared slabs, which I have done so already. And then as far as tools go, you'll need a fettling knife and a serrated rib. And then I have a jar of slip, and slip is basically just a liquefied version of the clay that's going to help do my joining, and a chip brush or some kind of bristle brush that you can use to apply that slip, and then also a right angle square. I have down just a board that I'm working on, some newspaper set down on that board. Boards can be made out of plywood or just about anything, but the trick is to make sure that you put down some newspaper so that when you're working with this clay, this newspaper is going to help keep the clay freely moving on the board as it begins to dry. If you don't have something down to give it some freedom to move, then it may get stuck and you'll get cracks and things like that. I'm gonna clear out some of this stuff and get you in here a little closer so you can see what I'm working on as I go through step by step. Alright, now what I did was I pre-rolled out this slab in advance, and then it needed to get a little stiff to a stage that we call leather hard. And as you can see, as I turn this corner, it's fairly stiff. It's called leather hard because it actually looks and acts and feels like leather. So to prepare for that, you basically roll out your slab in advance and you set it aside and let it firm up, wrapped in some plastic, for a couple of days until it gets to the consistency that you want. Right now I have it actually at the perfect consistency, where if I flex it a little, it just begins to get some cracks, but you don't want it so brittle that if you just barely touch it, it chips off. The first thing I'm going to do is give myself a nice clean straight edge by placing this right angle square down, and then taking my fettling knife and coming in and cutting this clean edge. And then I'm going to come across the front so that I know that I'm working with another clean edge. Okay, this is now my true 90-degree angle. At all times, if I need to adjust measurements this way, I need to make sure that I'm measuring off of a guide of at least one of these angles. For the base of this train, it's going to be 12 inches by 4 inches. So using this straight edge as my one measurement, I'm just placing this down so that I can come in and put a little tick mark with my fettling knife at the 4 point. I can adjust this, give myself a second one. Now, if I mess up this measurement, this is why I'm only leaving a tiny little poke, because this clay is very forgiving. As long as you didn't actually cut through, you can just come in and go, oh, made a mistake on my measurement, squish it back up, and then redo that measurement. Here we go, back on the 4. And again, I need to keep a straight edge in my measurement when I'm using this thing. So because this edge is a little bit longer, I'm going to go ahead and butt this up on here, matching my 2 tick marks. So I can go ahead and cut this long flat. Okay, that gives me 4 inches in width. I now need to get my 12 inches in length. Set this aside one quick second, see what's going on here, and then get my dots in here for my 12. And any little bits that I cut off, I'm going to save because I may be using them for my detail parts later. Now the next thing I need to do, this piece right here that I just cut is this bottom here, which actually got blended in. But you can see on the bottom part of the train, there is this undercarriage that gives me room to put the tires in, but it also affords this piece to float on the kiln shelf, because you want to try and keep the minimal amount of clay contact on the kiln shelf to prevent it getting stuck and breaking or cracking while you're doing the firing. In this case, I have installed this rail line in here that forms a little box at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and cut up some 1-inch thick strips. Now, the next thing I am going to do is I'm going to take my right angle square, that way, get a little bit closer here, and I am going to measure 3/4 inch from the edge, so I have it facing to where I'm going to be laying this on. I'm going to do that all around the whole thing, and I'm not going to be carving in, I'm just going to be putting little tick marks around my edges at 3/4 inch, so I have kind of a dotted guideline of where this rail is going to go. Hold that up so you can see all of my little hash marks. Alright, now I can do one of two things. I can either take that strip I made with the straight edge, balance it on here and go, oh, right about here is where I want it to end, and cut it. Or, if you want to, you could come in here and actually measure from the inside of that line to the inside of that line, figure out what that measurement is, transfer that measurement to this piece, and then go ahead and make the cut. In this case, that would be 10.5 inches. Again, I want to make sure I have my clean edge. I'm going to do it that way, but go ahead, stack the two of them, measure my 10.5 inches, 10.5. And I don't need that for the straight line. I'm just going to come down and slice into it. And fortunately, I have enough here to get my little sides, but let's get going on attaching this undercarriage here first. So now is where I need to have my slip and my serrated rib. The serrated rib has these little teeth on it. If you do not have a serrated rib, you could use a fork or you could use a needle tool. Basically what you're going to be doing is coming in and scratching and scoring this area to give yourself somewhere for the pieces to adhere to. This is not unlike what you see on the underside of a tile. Put these score lines in so that the mastic will stick when you install those tiles. But in this case, we're going to use it so that the slip will stick. And I'm going to do that there, and then I'm going to go ahead and do that to the one side of these guys. And I kind of went in a bit of two different opposite directions. I do one straight line and then one going in the opposite way, just to make sure I get some good hash marks going in with the scoring. You want to take your slip and apply it to either the base or one of these sides. It really doesn't matter which one you apply it to. You just need to get slip onto at least one side. And then I'm plopping that on right onto the inside of my line. This is the most important part. Slab is not nearly as structurally sound as coil. Coil is a very strong, very stable type of technique. To help this slab process along, we do need to go in and add some reinforcement, and to do that, I am just going to roll a little tiny coil. So I'm just basically squishing up a chunk of clay here that is soft. You want either fresh clay from the bag or some really soft clay. You don't want anything that's going to be, leftover slab bits that have been hardening. And then just using the palm of my hands to roll out this coil. And then I'm going to take that coil, and it doesn't have to be really thick, you're just kind of using it in here to reinforce this section. Probably thicker than I wanted it to be, but that's okay. I'll spread it out a bit. Then you're going to want to flip it over to the back side. Or in this case, I'm doing this towards you so you can see what I'm doing, but, I'll maybe have this towards me. And then I'm going to use my fettling knife just to clean up this edge. This is going to be the edge that the wheels are going to end up on, so I don't really want to add a giant coil that's going to be visible there. The underside of the train, on the inside of where this carriage is going to go, it's not really going to be visible to the outside, so I don't mind if there's a chunky coil on that side. But I don't want it to be something visible on this side. However, I still need to get this blended to make sure that this doesn't go anywhere from this side. So I'm just smoothing this out. Alright. That side. Side's on. And I'm going to repeat that step for this side. Alright, just wanted to get in a little bit closer so you could see a little bit more of me applying this second side. Now, this obviously was not trimmed properly because I have a little bit of extra here. There's no problem. You can just come in, take a look at it and go, okay, I need to slice off a little bit here, even it out. There we go. Same deal with here. A little over my mark. This can happen because when you cut the slab, it is wet clay, so it's possible that it's stretched out a bit as you're working. Now I'm going to take the bits that I saved from the edges and then butt them up here and go, guesstimate at what I need. Make a bit of a tick mark here on the inside, and I can cut that. Check it. Okay, that's good. So I should need 2 of those. Cut up 2, 1 for each side. And this time I need to make sure that I score up along these sides as well. Alright, that is your undercarriage. Once that is on there, you can go ahead and just flip that over. Voila. Now, before you go too crazy, you want to make sure that you get an air hole in here without putting a giant gaping hole in the center of my train somewhere. So, putting one down here on the bottom makes it pretty much invisible because no one's going to look down there. That gives the air somewhere to go when this gets fired in the kiln and gets steamed up. Basically all the excess water becomes steam, needs somewhere to go, and so that the piece doesn't blow up, it needs to exit somewhere. Just envision that there is a tiny little passenger running around your train, and a fire breaks out, because that's what happens when it goes into the kiln, right? This giant fire happens. In order for that little passenger to get through in the inside of your train, is there an exit hole? And so in this case for me, that's going to be on the bottom. So I want to go ahead and put that in here. So I'm going to take the fettling knife, make sure that I'm in the middle here and between my wells so that I'm not cutting into that undercarriage I just put in, and I'm just making a tiny circle around to take out a chunk of this clay. And then I can take the back end of the fettling knife and just make it nice and smooth. Now flip it over and then deal with smoothing that end out. The rest of the time I'm going to leave it upright because I'm going to be working by stacking up these edges and adding up the side walls. Alright, to start building up the top of this train car, the first thing I'm going to cut are actually these side little panels. First off, I'm going to measure 2 little cubes that are going to be 3.5 inches high by 4 inches wide. Actually, I need 3 of them. And because you want 1 for each end, and then we're going to need this middle support so that the roof doesn't go and cave in when you put it on. So I'm going to go ahead and cut 3. Now you can see that my train has a curved arch. So to get that, I am just going to take my roll of tape here and eyeball, as you can see, and then hopefully that looks centered to you. I can't tell from here as I turn it around. Looks like it's okay. And then I'm going to be tracing that circle around it so I can cut off the excess. Alright, so now I have side 1, side 2, and this is going to get set aside for a little bit later. I'm going to go ahead and slip and score and attach these 2 ends. And now, where this low peak ends, once it's slip and scored, I can go ahead and measure whatever this height is and the distance in between these 2, and that's going to become my next piece. As I said, now I can take a measurement from this side piece. And it looks like, to me, about 2 inches. So 2 inches by, what is my width? 11. So I'm going to cut 2 2-inch by 11 strips out of my remaining slabs. Before we can attach that roof, we do need to get that piece in there, that additional support. Because we have added those sides, it is going to be too thick to put in there. So here's where having a little bit of extra scrap slab that you've had comes in handy. Let's get that curve back on. Alright, we have our curve, and then you can just stack one on each side. So one butted up against there, so I know that edge is extra. I'm just going to cut it right off, and then I can move that scrap piece to the other edge, chop that off, and I should have a piece that will nestle right inside the two. Perfect. Now, the only problem is that, remember that air hole for the little tiny passenger that's running around that train. If I was to insert this wall and then go smack a roof over the top of this thing, only the passengers sitting on this side of the train are going to be able to escape when that fire breaks out when it goes into the kiln. So I need to put an air hole or a doorway for them to pass through from one end to the other. No one's going to see this. It's going to be encapsulated inside of this train. So just get yourself a hole poked in there, same deal, cutting through. You don't want it to be too crazy because you want these structural walls to be there. I'm going to just eyeball what looks like the center of the piece and slip and score and attach this to the inside. The next thing we need to do is to measure for this roof, and I have a very technical way of doing this, and that is just to take the edge of your ruler right where the base of that arc is and kind of just wrap it around and see how far it goes and to the opposite edge. And for me, that's 5 inches. If I were to do that full 5 inches, I would not have this bit of overhang, so I like having a little bit of an overhang and room for play on my roof, so I'm actually going to cut a 6-inch strip. And we're going to do some fitting. This is a curve, so I want to be very careful not to crack too much of my slab here. I'm going to very gently place it, looks like center, and then slowly fold it over to get that curve. I did this dry. I didn't apply my slip or score anything yet because I want to get that curve going where I can adjust it if need be without it getting stuck accidentally. Now that it's on there, I'm going to just gently roll it off. If you have something round, like a pipe or something, you could place this over it, but for the time being, I'll just keep it upright like this, trying to keep that curve going while I spend some time scoring here. There's not too many places here that we can add coil except for the underside of this that won't be visible. So I'm going to make sure that I blend really well these edges and blend this into by picking up a great deal of the clay and kind of smashing it all around. Make sure I'm getting it all good and blended. And I'm going to just slightly tip it so that you can see. I'm going to roll a coil and get it in there. Alright, now I am going to grab some plastic and wrap up this entire train. The best plastic you can use is plastic drop cloth or some really low-grade contractor trash bags, not regular kitchen trash bags, because those regular kitchen trash bags are going to have microfibers and dry out your clay. So wrapping this up for a couple of days and letting it fully get stable will really give you a good place to start. It'll be nice and strong before you come in and carve in all those extra details. So I'll see you in a couple of days. What did you do it?